They are all welcome to our show tonight. This Sunday from Cyprus, we're going to have with us two special guests tonight. It's the Sunday that we're talking about international issues, especially in English, and we have guests from around the globe. Tonight, we have two special guests that we're going to discuss about the Chinese policy in Western Balkans and, of course, what's going on between Iran and China after the 25-year agreements between the two countries and the changes that they may come after the Abraham Accords. I will introduce you once again, Alexis Legakis. He's a PhD student at Pandio University. He specialized in Iranian foreign policy. And with Alexis, approximately every 6 weeks, we are taking a show and we discuss about Iran. Alexis, you are welcome to our show for once again.
Hello, Paulina. Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. With us, we have a special guest that she comes from Montenegro. It's Mrs. Mila Serovic, and she's doing her PhD in MGMO in Russian Federation. And actually, she's doing a very interesting topic for all of us, and especially for the Greeks. And that's why it's one of the reasons that she's in our show. She's studying the Chinese policy in Western Balkans. She's been in a lot of surveys, and actually, she's done a pretty interesting survey and research about Chinese investments in Western Balkans. Mila, well, welcome to our show tonight from the biggest Greek web TV.
Hello, and I'm so glad to be today with you, and regards from Moscow.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm going to take it from the very easy way. I'm going to start with Alexis. Alexis, it was 2 days ago, it was the Iranian foreign minister in Beirut. So actually they discussed they're going to renovate or rebuild the port after, approximately after 2 years from the explosion. So I would like to know why the Iranian foreign minister is interested in rebuilding Beirut port.
Yeah, Beirut port is very important for Iran. As everybody knows, the Iranian influence in Lebanon is huge, especially now under the economic crisis. We see how difficult the living conditions are now in Lebanon because of the sanctions and the economic crisis in Syria, which has repercussions for Lebanon. So yeah, we see that Iran will undertake many infrastructure projects in Lebanon, and yeah, part of this is the port, of course.
So, Alexis, do we trust that Iran has a specific interest in economic interest apart from the political interest this period in Lebanon?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we see that the Iranian influence in Lebanon, especially as well in Syria, there is a deepening of the economic influence of Iran. We see that Iran now handles the management of Latakia port. So we see that the Iranians want as well to develop such an interest and influence in Lebanon as well on the ports, because this is part of the strategy of Iran to become a central hub in the One Belt, One Road initiative of China, and wants to divert the route to the Mediterranean ports. So we see that we can, for example, analyze this Iranian interest in that context.
So actually, I trust that probably if this is going to happen, and if this route is, the exit of China and Iran to Mediterranean after the agreement, the 25 years agreement, that means that the Beirut port is going to be the main competitor to Haifa port, that actually is obtaining also Chinese investments.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we see that the Chinese are investing heavily and massively in the Middle East. But they are playing it very smart. They are investing in the both camps in the Middle East. So they are investing in the countries of the axis of resistance, and at the same time, they are investing in Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Pakistan. So they are playing it very well. That's true.
Okay, that's is going to be a long way to discuss in this show. Mila, from your side, you are getting into Balkans actually. What makes Chinese to invest in Western Balkans?
It's a very good question that I can just try to reply. It's right now it's not that obvious because as we can see from the investments and the credits that China gives to the Western Balkans countries, and not only mostly South European countries, we can say that they don't search for any political interest by far. They invest a lot of money and they do great projects. And maybe if as we have here so many Greek audience, and you both are from Greece, you probably know that the greatest investment in the Balkans is Greek port of Piraeus, if I spell it well. And it was the first and by far the largest Balkan project in which China invested about 600 million euros, and Costco, one of the China's top shipping companies, paid an extra 300 million euros for to own a controlling stake. To own a controlling state in the formerly Greek port, by far that turned out to be great investment. And for 10 years, Piraeus has become and maintained the status of one of the best ports in Europe. So I would like to start with that project, and of course after that, after Greece, most of the Balkan countries are included in um, initiative. The most important one is mechanism.
So, so actually, there is a kind of I mean, can we say that the Chinese invest? So they come and they invest to countries, but they are, what they want to do is to build to handle the situation of economic investments next to political interest.
Yes, because it's really hard to find any political interest because they really don't intervene in any political situation. And for maybe some interesting story about Chinese is that they don't choose any country like maybe other great powers like America, like Russia, like European Union. They don't choose any good partner, like political partner, like about the ideology or something like that. No, they don't care about political situation in the country. They just invest. Even you have Albania or so-called Kosovo, and from the other side Romania and Serbia, with whom they historically have good relations. But for China, it doesn't matter. They invest in each country equally. So yeah, so it's just one fact that shows that China doesn't see any political implication in that. But by far, so maybe in future we can say that it's not that like only economical interest.
Mila, what are the biggest investments that they occur at the moment, or China is planning to do in Western Balkans?
First of all, it's of course Serbia, because Serbia is one of is in that region in the Western Balkan. It's the biggest country. I mean the ex-Yugoslav countries. And why is Serbia so important? Of course, it's not part of NATO, so it's easier to cooperate with Serbia. It's also not a candidate. It's just a candidate to enter European Union, but it's still not a part of European Union. So with Serbian government, it's much easier to work than with, for example, southeastern countries like Hungary, like Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, and so on, because the law allows them to cooperate with Chinese. And about your question, which are the greatest projects? Of course, as I said about the Greek port, and then of course, first of all, it's investment in infrastructure. There is a corridor 11 highway connecting Montenegro and Serbia, and investments of 1999 million euros in the energy sector, reconstruction of a thermal power plant. It's also in Serbia. So we can say that they invest a lot in Serbia. And then the Serbia is the only country that also buys a weapon and military equipment from China. So it's also indicative moment that we can also speak about.
Mila, what is the situation exactly? I know that you come from Montenegro. So, what is the situation politically in Montenegro that is favorizing the Chinese investments in this small state in Balkans?
Okay, since 2014, Montenegro started to ask to search for a foreign partner to build a highway. And then, firstly, Montenegrin government, they asked, of course, it's like a natural step, European Union to help and to invest in the infrastructure, but they refused. So so Chinese appeared, and they gave them a good conditions for a good credit, and then of course. Chinese government and Montenegrin side, they signed a treaty. It was a hidden treaty. No one could see it, but we just when that law passed through Montenegrin government, society find out about that. So okay, it's like 7 years already. They're like they want to build. They already built some part of that highway, but there are many corruption moments that happen because also law doesn't recognize Chinese as that kind of Chinese law doesn't see Montenegro as like a country, like a state, just like a physical I'll say that.
Oh, it's an entity. It's recognized in Montenegro as a legal entity.
Yes, why I'm telling that, because in a case of that Montenegro is not able to pay a debt, China can easily just take a part of Montenegrin territory, which can be not so good for whole Europe, because it's a central Europe. No, it's of course in the south of Europe, but it's a part of Europe. So it's also NATO country. So I don't think it can be a good. It shows a good political will from European Union if they don't help in this problem.
Mila, I come from mostly, though, I've done my PhD on geopolitics. I come from the investment sector. And we approached Montenegro, it was a few months ago, because we're very interested on the citizenship program. So they tried to sell a lot the passports, they tried to do some initiations on this kind of investments. And in that period, we understood that there is a big interest from China investing into that. I tried to understand how come a treaty comes to say that in the case that I cannot pay the debt, I can take part of your territory. And from the other side, what is the role of Serbia into this treaty? Because this highway is going to connect Serbia and Montenegro, if I am not wrong.
Yes, you're right. No, Serbia doesn't have any connection to that. Of course, like if we look at like from the other side, it can have some political problems, but um, the implications of this debt for a small country like Montenegro are, of course, likely to be significant. And looking at other smaller countries dealing with a Belt and Road Initiative, related debts does not bode well for Montenegro. For example, in Sri Lanka, their Chinese debts have gotten out of control, so that China can, so that China has seized this strategically valuable Indian Ocean port as part of a repayment deal debt. The same repayment deal debt is in Montenegro, so like no one can intervene in this situation, even Serbia. Okay, when the problem with this repayment deal debt happened, many like experts they said maybe, for example, Russia or Serbia or European Union can give a money can pay that debt for Montenegro. So Montenegro has debt to, like, for example, EU, then to China, but doesn't nothing happen. So it sounds really strange, but it's like that. So even 2 months ago, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Chinese Republic, he also wrote, he announced that they will not take a part of the Montenegrin territory, but they will just use a port for. They will not ask anyone to use a port for 90 years. So I don't see any difference in that.
For me, I mean, it's a pure political interest. This one, we invest, but from the other side, we invest in a very angel way. In the case that you cannot pay us back, we intervene politically because when you say I can use the port without asking, for example, I use the port in Balkan. That is, I mean, a small port in close to Italy. It's in the middle of Europe. It's in a very core area. So certainly this has a kind of political interest. Alex, in the case of Iran and China, the agreement, what are the implications for Iran? Do we know it's something that came out, I mean, publicly? Because they also, like Mila is describing, they try also to keep it in a transparent, let's say, way, but not in public way. So they didn't publish much. Also, I gave a kind of interview a few months ago about it, but everything was, they still remain in a very general way in that time. So, do we have any new indications? What is this agreement about? I mean, do they have any, any kind of common issues like the one that Mila is describing us at the moment?
Yeah, it's true. There are a lot of rumors around the comprehensive strategic partnership between Iran and China, but the fact is that it's steeped in secrecy. So there are some leaks. We don't know if these leaks are true. They cannot be verified, so it's steeped in
What
secrecy.
kind of leaks do we have, Alexis?
Yeah, the most famous one is that China will invest in the span of 25 years around $400 billion in FDI, in foreign direct investment. There's another leak which said that the Chinese will have a military base, probably in some Iranian islands in the Persian Gulf. But I don't think that, because, first of all, the Iranian constitution forbids the provision to foreigners of military bases. So this is very important because one of the fundamental clauses of the Islamic Republic of Iran is independence. So that would be a total contradiction if something that happens. So I don't think so. I don't think that is valid, this leak. So there are a lot of leaks. One leak is that it's more like a roadmap. So it's a work in progress. In the next months and next years, they will negotiate and will agree on specific policy policies to enhance the
Alexis,
cooperation.
in the link tape of Zarif, there was any kind of comment about this agreement. I think
Yeah.
that back then it became a huge issue.
Yeah, it became a huge issue because the Iranians, as you know, as everybody knows, are very sensitive about their sovereignty and independence. So when these leaks came about these islands, there was a lot of reaction from from the society at large, from politicians, even former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad reacted to that and said that he reacted very negatively and criticized the government and the establishment that they have to be more forthcoming to the public about the specifics of this deal. So yes, there's a lot of reaction, but officially, for example, the then Foreign Minister Zarif and even the establishment rejected all these claims that it's out of the question to lease some islands to the Chinese. What we know is that the Iranians and the Chinese will cooperate in infrastructure projects not only in the energy sector, in the transportation sector in Iran. They will as well cooperate in this regard in Iraq, which is very
Yeah, it's central.
important and very interesting because, and another interesting issue is that Assad expressed his interest to join the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative. So that should be an indication of what we will see in the next phase. Probably Iran wants to lead the route, as I told you before, of the one belt, one road initiative to Syria, to Latakia port, where it can export to Europe the Chinese goods. So this is very important in my opinion, and we will see in the not distant future what this deal will be, because we know that the Chinese have made several such agreements with other countries. They have made these agreements with Pakistan. They've made agreements with United Arab Emirates, as I told you before, Saudi Arabia. So we will see. We will see.
Mila, I was in the afternoon. I have a lot of friends that are doing a lot of analysis, especially on Sundays afternoons. So we were discussing about the agreement between Iran and the agreements that China is doing in Western Balkans. So, because you are studying and you are doing further on the Chinese policy, do you believe that these agreements they can be connected in the future? So we see the port in Beirut that's going to belong, not it's going to be, it's going to be operated by Iran and probably Chinese, and also we see the port also in Montenegro. So even from the inland part, and not only from the shipping part, from the sea part, it can be a kind of connection. What are the principles? How do you see the Chinese policies? Is it an aggressive policy? Do they have the Confucius kind of constructivist principles that we share culture and we share civilization, but we are not attacking other people? Is Xi got said the last it was 100 years from the Communist Party anniversary, so he said that no one is going to touch China, and China is not touching other countries. We respect other countries. How we can orientate and describe the Chinese foreign policy?
So it's quite hard to answer your question, but first of all, I would like to give just a small summary about the main goals of Belt and Road Initiative, because of course everyone heard for that initiative, but it's hard to find out why China needs this initiative. First of all, stimulating the economy of the Asian region helps to strengthen China both economically and politically, of course. The second one is that the stability of the Asian region ensures a stable economic development with significant fluctuations. A third point is that development of economic relations is conducive to better regional development in China. Additionally, demonstrates the strength of future economies that help solve global economic problems, such as the global crisis in 2009. And then China's ties with Europe and Africa are strengthened as part of the Belt and Road Initiative, and China, with the help of um, its banks and funds, is now becoming a representative financial competitor in the international market. So if we uh, um, take a look from the global perspective, yes, we can connect that Iranian question and the Montenegro, the Western Balkan question, and its influence in Chinese influence in both regions. But honestly, I mean, in my personal opinion, I don't think that somewhere in Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs they make some plans about taking this, considering this region so as so important one. Um, they need Western Balkans region as a good gap, as a good a gate to to the Western market, to the European Union, because there is what they need, and of course. China is entering economic integration in a targeted, planned, and gradual manner, creating a network of international relations that contributes to its development strategy and corrects irregulations within its own economy by, of course, solving by that way political and other problems. So, as I said, for them, when they're using Western Balkan region, they need uh, European Union markets. So for now, I can say only that about I because I'm not that much into Iranian questions. So that's the only thing I can say about that.
Mila, how China does work? I mean, do they have a pre-plan? Because we know about Iran. With Alexis, we discuss it quite often. We know that Iran, it has a policy for the next 100 years. So we know Iran where wants to get. It's something that Iran has pre-decided. Any government that comes is coming to um, is going to approach a certain achievements. So, how the Chinese foreign policy is planned? Is it the Foreign Affairs Ministry? There are other lobbies. There are some other links that. For example, the ministry is taking care. For example, in the case of Iran, they're taking care, of course, what the Office of Ayatollah, they say, the guardians, people's opinion most of the time. How does it work with China? For example, the Chinese Minister of Foreign Affairs goes out and say this is the policy. Do they have a kind of council that they have pre-decided? How does it work? We want to understand how the Chinese foreign policy works.
Okay, first of all, I'm not an expert in Chinese foreign policy, but as far as I know, they don't work, for example, like Americans, like they did until maybe half a year ago. About this, of course, especially with this case, about especially with the Afghanistan case. But what I want to say is that they don't have any clear foreign policy. They don't show it. They of course they have okay, we can compare with the USA. I mean, with their Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they have many blocks, like blocks of Southeastern Europe. Then they have another block of in their ministry. They have another block that is dedicated only to work with Western Europe, then with Africa, and so on and so on. And there, what is a little bit strange for us is that they're not that much linked. They have like a budget. They have a lot of budget, and then the workers have to find a good. They have to find a good way to invest that money. So for their bureaucrats, the bureaucrats, it's not that important. Like what are the political implications in that regions? So maybe in some, I don't know, you know that Chinese, they think in 20, 50, and 100 years. So maybe in some future time, their policy will be connected, and then they will find some, they will show some political interest. But by far, it's really hard to say, because we cannot say from this, we cannot um, make such a conclusions from this situation that we have right now.
I mean, just for me, how we describe at the moment the Chinese foreign policy is like a good manager. So they are doing a very sophisticated distribution of budget, of investments, and from the other side, probably they want, they categorize their risk, and they say first wave of countries, second wave of countries, until to mitigate the risk, and from the other side to have the results that they're expecting to. But Alexis, from the other side, um, this agreement with Iran, of course, is going to be executed not only from Iran but from Iraq. I mean, Assad came out. I mean, Iranian foreign minister was 3 days ago in Beirut. So probably what they just come and say, guys, we are here with the Chinese. This is our offer. Of course, from the other side, Lebanon cannot say no to Iranian offer. Politically, they are very involved with Iran, but also this China-Iran agreement, it has a lot of implications for Central Asia. We know that the Iranian foreign investments are tremendous in that area. We see Iran that investment not also in dams, but also they are building roads. They are very involved in construction and infrastructure. They start from Tajikistan to Azerbaijan. They even try to get into Kyrgyzstan. We have them in Afghanistan, especially in the case of Herat. Iran is investing in cultural centers. It has one of the biggest publications in Tajikistan. Now they are trying to modify things and unify them in order to have a common newspaper in Farsi, because most of the countries that they speak Farsi, but they have a Persian vision or a Persian kind of civilization. So in my mind, I had always one question since the time that this agreement came across, and I think that I have to search a lot for this answer. But we see a kind of religious, not a kind, it is a religious republic. Iran is an Islamic republic, so they have Ummah. They want to build an Islamic state. They are following a kind of very prestigious traditions. There are people with a great civilization, and of course, they get into even into adventures in order to maintain their interests. But from the others, we see China that is a China more liberal in our eyes, but we know that it's a communist China. They don't share the religious visions that Iran is having. They don't share the religious visions of Iraq or, for example, Armenia. Even if we go to Armenia, uh, how this can affect, I mean, there is a kind of tremendous lack of trust when it comes to religions. So we see a communist power and we see an Islamic republic. Is religion is going to be one of the, let's say, from the constructivist part, one of the key powers, one of the variables that they may affect this agreement?
Yeah, it's a constructivist question that. As a realist, I would totally. I would not agree with that. In my opinion, it doesn't matter. The culture or the religion, when it comes to politics, especially high politics, it doesn't matter at all. And we have seen that in Iran as well as in China. They don't care what the other state is as long as it is very in their interest to cooperate and does not interfere in the affairs of the other state. That is exactly what happens in the relations between China and Iran. For example, you can never hear from Iran, from the Iranian side, any criticism, any mention at all for the Uyghurs in the eastern China, in western China. So you will never hear about the minority or they are suppressed. You will never hear this from Iran. Never. So on the other
Same thing
side,
with Serbia, like.
Yeah, the same thing. Yeah. Yeah, and as far as China is concerned, you will never hear from China to have any problem, even with with the Talibs, with the Taliban taking power. They were the first state to recognize the Taliban. They even offered to economic help, economic aid, and even pushed for the international community to recognize the new government in Afghanistan. So we see that the Chinese don't care at all what is the governing system um, in the country they are interested to have, or they have economic interests. So a common case of interest between the two countries is now Afghanistan. We see that Afghanistan, until now, until the pro-Western government of Ghani, they were not interested at all to join the One Belt, One Road initiative.
Now,
Because, yeah, they were not interested because of the American pressure, of course, because the Americans are against this initiative. So we see now with the Taliban in power, this has changed. So the Chinese are very happy about that, of this new reality, because it's much worthier, it's more cost effective to take the route through Afghanistan instead of taking the route from Central Asia, from Kazakhstan to Tajikistan and then to Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. So it's much cheaper to take the route from Afghanistan. So we see the Chinese are probably the happiest to see the new government in Afghanistan.
so when it comes to the agreement with Iran, do you believe that it's just about money? So Iran in the future is not gonna crash the whole thing if there is a kind of implication, let's say, of China to the Muslim minorities in China or in Kashmir?
No, I don't think so, because Iran is really in need of this investment, of this money, because as you know, Iran now is very isolated because of the sanctions. Iran tries to be less inflicted by the sanctions, but so far it had a great cost for its economy, for the living standards of its citizens. So it needs Chinese investment. Otherwise, if it if it it has to look to the West, but as you know, that won't happen. Now the strategic orientation of Iran, it's not only with the new government of Raisi we see, it's even under Rouhani government that the new orientation in Iranian foreign policy is towards the east.
So there is this kind of issue, and it's a question for both of you. I will continue with Alexis, and I will come to Mila for the same question. We have seen Obama that tried, just isolated Hillary, and he just got back Kerry, and he tried to approach Iran. They knew that if they approach Iran, the problem is going to be solved with the Asia pivot, and especially with the involvement of China into MENA, and especially to Middle East. So Iran is the dead clock, let's say, and the key point in order to initiate or to stop the Chinese movement towards the region of Middle East. At the moment, later we have still got Trump did, so he was quite aggressive with Iran. He promoted a more American pro-Israeli circumstances. But at the moment, what we see is that we are coming back, and at the moment we see Mila Alexis, we see that there is a kind of issue that once again now Biden is trying to approach and reapproach Iran. So do you believe that what's going on in Vienna with the nuclear stuff, and especially with the agreements, or a kind of the approach is coming and China needs to worry?
Yeah, of course, China is worried that, for example, with the JCPOA under the Obama administration and the Rouhani administration, the Chinese and the Russians were, of course, very concerned because they feared that Iran would open up to the West. So they would lose, of course, some influence in that country. So far, we see that the Biden administration follows the same policy towards Iran as the Trump administration, because Biden, although he said before the American elections, said he would return to the JCPOA, to the nuclear agreement with Iran, he said at the same time that he wants a stronger deal. What does this mean? It means that he wants to include Iran's regional activities. For example, its links with the Shiite militias and its ballistic missile program. But he said that he would first return to the JCPOA, and after that he would look for a stronger deal. He would negotiate for Iranian activities. But we see that the Iranians, it's a red line for Iran, that it would never negotiate its regional activity, its links with the Shia militias, its ballistic missile program. So we're now in a stalemate. We see that Iran is trying to push to. One moment, please. Yeah. So now Iran is following a hard negotiating tactic. It's delaying the process, the negotiations. It says so far in a vague tone that it wants to continue the negotiations in Vienna, but they have to review the negotiations that so far went underway with the Rouhani administration, and we see this. We are not sure at all where this goes, but one thing is sure, that Iran wants to revive the nuclear deal, but under specific terms. That's for sure.
Mila, how is Europe reacting into these investments of China to Montenegro? You have to unmute yourself, please.
It's okay now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, very nice. So while Alex was speaking, I just remembered one thing, and with the comparisons, if we compare your policy of America, the United States, and, for example, Chinese policy in the Balkans, on the example of Serbia, like Belt and Road Initiative is a kind of Chinese preventive response to the US strategic efforts to contain, isolate, and the independence of this Far Eastern country. I think the same thing is with Iran, in my opinion. So at the same time, no one can stop China from investing, because open Western resistance is not against China, but against Russia. So there is no any ready and viable capital for Europe or the United States for such investment in the Balkans. But very important moment that I wanted to emphasize is that. As maybe you heard, like a half a year ago, I think in May this year, China and European Union, they already have concluded comprehensive agreement on investment, and European Parliament had to ratify that very important agreement. And but they refused to ratify it, because of course, as Alex before mentioned, political situation in China, and because of Uyghurs and so on. So this agreement between European Union and China, that agreement was supposed to create a better balance in the EU-China trade relationship. The EU has traditionally been much more open than China to foreign investment. So this was true as regards foreign investment in general. China now commits to open up to the EU in a number of key sectors. And also in the period of Trump, he also many times said that it's not fair that China can come everyone with its investments, and but no one can invest that much in China. So this agreement was supposed to solve that situation. But of course, the reason for deny from European Union side is a political implication in political situation in China, and from the other side, Beijing denies any geopolitical ambition and claims to support the unification of Europe, but Brussels has already begun attempts to limit the reach of the Asian giant. I think in February 2019, European leaders voted in favor of a new system for monitoring foreign investments, which will which was supposed to limit China's ability to buy companies operating in the field of strategic technologies and infrastructure. But nevertheless, the Western Balkans remain an open field outside the European Union, in which a significant part of the investments of the, as I mentioned before, mechanism 17 plus 1, but then Litva went, so it's again 16 plus 1. 16 plus 1 cooperation has already been made, so they can try to prevent, but they can't stop the Chinese investments.
Mila, how does it work from the part of labor law? Do you have any Chinese factories? Do you have any Chinese companies that they work in or they operate in Montenegro and in Serbia? What is how is, let's say, the employment law it works? Is there any kind of protocol between these two countries, China with Serbia and Montenegro? Are the circumstances quite fine for the employees? Because there are a lot of things that they came across newspapers that China is not what we expect, because a lot of people they criticize the Western way of employment, the Western way of life, the Western way of how we understand politics and investments. Do you have any indications about it?
Yes, very good question. And when you mentioned about investments and in this region from Chinese side, of course, it's the most, if I can say, the most important one is by far in Serbia, because eternal law of Serbian state, it supports Chinese investments, and even though many citizens of Serbia they how to say, they're against somehow they're against behavior of Chinese employees, but they don't receive any help from state. And I read some interviews from it's mostly Western interviews, because you can't find such information in Serbian media, but some journalists from the Netherlands, they came to Serbia, and then they started to search this question, and then they found out that there are many uncanny and many problems in companies, in Chinese companies that work in Serbia, and those conditions that Chinese brought are really for European manner are absolutely impossible. They're too bad, if I can say so. And then the workers, they work for 12 hours, 13 hours, and then they receive a small amount of money. So I don't know why the situation is like that. But the factories, they work very well, but workers receive a small amount of money, and they live under the bad conditions.
Yeah, when I have seen that, it was very strange for me, because when we visited, especially Montenegro, in doing in checking for further investments with the new schemes of the government, we were expected to see something more innovative. And suddenly, when we have seen what Chinese are doing, especially in Serbia, we were quite crushed, and we were quite anxious how we can move further, because we understood that this kind of need creates kind of mentality and cultures, and we don't know how would be possible reputable investors to come across these two countries and invest further in a new way. Mila, how does European Union is reacting to this collaboration between Montenegro and China? Because I think Montenegro is, of course, it's not in the European Union, but you use also euro, correct?
Yes, Montenegro is a candidate. It's a candidate to is one of the candidates for membership in European Union. Maybe as it was written in last paper of European Commission, they expect us to enter EU in 2025, but somehow I doubt it. And they, of course, they don't like this situation with China, because if Montenegro continue to deal with Chinese, for example, in 5 years, it will be not just the Montenegrin problem; it will be EU problem, because such a problem in borders of European Union is not it's not good for everyone. But by far they all the time they have statements against that, but they don't help somehow. And I think 3 months ago, Prime Minister of Montenegro asked European Commission to help to give back this amount of money that China asks, but EU refused to help. And even though this government didn't sign that treaty with the Chinese, it signed a previous government, a previous party with Djukanovic as head, but anyway, they did not help. So Montenegro had to ask more money from MMA, the MMI. So so that's how they kind of succeeded to repay first amount of money for a credit.
Alexi, what are the implications that Chinese foreign policy can have to Western countries and especially European Union?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Uh, it's complicated. First of all, this rise of China, we are seeing the last, we could say, 20 years, 25 years probably. It's not what will this be for us, for the Western societies? That's a very interesting question. So far, the one thing that the West criticizes a lot China is that the Chinese are keeping their consumerism very low. What does this mean? So they say that they don't consume so much with this economic rise. They should have consumed more of Western services to lessen this imbalance between this trade imbalance between these two blocks. So
I
so
tell you, I tell you why I'm asking. It was a few months ago that I went on LinkedIn and I wrote something not so fabulous for China. So suddenly, I had a kind of attack from pro-Chinese people, let's say. And I don't know if they were a kind of bots or something like this, but the attack, it was tremendous. I didn't expect it, and I didn't say something really bad about China. It was a kind of not criticism; it was a kind of problematic. So immediately they just appear more than 10 bots or 10 people just explaining how China works. They take it from the good and the bad way of how they commented what I wrote. From the other way, I have seen a kind of survey. It came out a few months ago, 2 months ago, that it says that if China and Iran they conclude this agreement, they use the port of Beirut or any other kind of inland places, and they transport and they bring new goods to European Union because they will approach first European Union in order to get into the Western market. We see that the consumers probably they are going to have new needs. We're going to have new needs, and the new needs they bring new mentalities.
You
So
mean the
the
European consumers?
of course we're
Yeah.
going to have new products and new goods. They are going to be Chinese goods. So how I mean from the economic and also from the cultural perspective, what kind of implications we are going to have with this rise of China in Western markets through Europe?
Yeah, we see that China is the global factory. We see that the workers now in the EU, in the European Union, only account for 10 to 11% of the working force. So, and most of them are situated in Germany, of course. So we see the labor force now is situated in the East. So this has a lot of repercussions in the Western societies for unskilled workers who have a difficulty in finding jobs. And the other thing is with the Chinese is with their investments. We see that they're investing, as I told you before, massively in East Asia, in Western Asia, in Africa, um, where they can get waivers of the labor force law in that countries. They even tried to do that in Greece. There were a lot of negotiations. They asked for waivers in the laws that handle the working laws. They
We
did
were
not get that.
satisfied. We were satisfied in Greece with Costco and China. What was the issue, Alexis?
Yeah, the issue was first of all if they could get a free economic zone where they can be waived from the Greek working law, so from the working labor law. That didn't They didn't get that. And then there were some negotiations for the what would be the minimum wage for an unskilled worker in the Costco in the port of Piraeus. There were the negotiations centered in Greece, and there were yeah they
So,
this
so is there any kind of expectations by Iran and the other countries that are going to be part of this Chinese global factory? Do do
yeah
the Iranian forces they want this? I have many doubts because when it comes to the prestige of Iran, they don't accept to be underestimated.
yeah that's true. Especially the Iranians are very sensitive about that. Yeah, they with this 25-year comprehensive strategic partnership, there were many some unions in Iran that criticized the agreement because there was total secrecy about this agreement. So yes, yeah, there are concerns in Iran about this agreement, but we will see. We will see how this materializes. For Iran, I mean, for the government and the establishment of Iran, it's very important because, as I told you before, Iran aspires to be the hub, the central hub of the central corridor of BRI, of the Belt and Road Initiative. So, and even aspires now to bypass Turkey. The first thought was to the central corridor to pass through Central Asia, then go to Iran, and then go to Turkey, and then to Europe. But we see that Iran now tries to divert this route or even supplement this route and divert it towards the Mediterranean coast of Syria or Lebanon. That's very interesting. We see that there is a growing antagonism between Iran and Turkey, not only as far as the Belt and Road Initiative is concerned, but as well in the Caucasus. where there is the North-South corridor, which is a very important project, which is not that much mentioned in the Western media, and we should focus more on that, on the North-South transportation corridor. It's very important, and that's why we see all this kind of antagonism in the Caucasus.
Mila, is Montenegro the country that is having the biggest or the heaviest investments in the Balkans? And from the other side, um, how do we explain this kind of interest of China into Serbia and Montenegro from the time that in our mind, especially we are Greeks, we are Orthodox, so a lot they say that Serbia especially is having a very good connection to Russia. So how can we see about how why is there so interest from Montenegro to Chinese investments, and from the other side, how does Russia see this kind of investments? There is a kind of antagonism or competition with China.
Mm-hmm. You hear me, right? Okay.
Yes.
First of all, that I would like to mention that China is increasing its presence in Serbia mostly and is becoming a significant investor. Then I have to say that the political relations between Serbia and China are very well. The political situation that Serbia faces in relation between um, how to say that, faces in relation to the European Union and NATO because of their desire to legitimize the unilateral separation of Kosovo can lead to destabilization in the country. So, from the point of view of official Belgrade, strengthening relations with Beijing is desirable because in this context, China is seen as a factor of stabilization. So China will most probably not will for sure protect its investments in Serbia, and from this point of view, China will be against any destabilization. I mean, China recognizes Kosovo as a part of Serbia. So for Serbia, it's really important to cooperate with China because China is strengthening its reputation as one of the greatest power in the world, and probably in future it will be the greatest power. Economically, it's already the greatest power. So Serbia does a very good foreign policy. Serbia cooperate with the. No one knows how it works, but Serbia succeeded to cooperate with European Union, with of course European Union, with NATO because of problems in Kosovo, with Russia from the other side, as you asked me, because traditionally Serbia has a very good, very warm relations with Russia, but when it comes to investments, Russia is in I think 10th place in a term of investments. So Russia doesn't have any realistic good position in the Balkans. We can say that Russia just lost its geopolitical interests in Western Balkans, and it lost. Russia lost its role as it had in the past, meaning of 19th century and with the Ottoman the fight with Ottoman Empire and so on, and of course in 20th century. And then I have to mention one very important thing. It's very actual one that during the COVID pandemic, the Chinese delegation visited Belgrade with a huge amount of equipment and 6 medical planes who came to help coordinate the national policy towards fighting the coronavirus epidemic. And it was quite funny picture when emotional Serbian president kissed the Chinese flag in gratitude and complained to Europe that it had not helped enough. And he said that European solidarity does not exist. It's a fairy tale. And he said that he sent a special letter to the only ones who can help, and that is China. And Vucic said to the citizens of Serbia it many times. So he asked for Chinese accessories, equipment, and advice in the fight against the pandemic. And very soon the help arrived in Belgrade. So I think Serbian government in this manner shows that it even wants to increase Chinese presence in Serbia in all uh, in all in even in a political term, in economical and every possible term. But from the other side, Montenegro, by coming the new government, um, Montenegrin leaders, they said that they want to reduce Chinese investments and Chinese presence in this small state. And they, as I already said, they called Europeans to help them to reduce this Chinese presence in Europe.
The Serbian president is one of my favorite presidents. He just he did a lot. He went to Srebrenica. They kicked him out. He went to Trump. He was so funny. He's making from time to time a kind of statements. He's a very favorite president to myself. I think I like him as much as I like Netanyahu from all his reactions and all these things that he used to do. He used to, embarrass himself and bring himself in so many difficult positions without any reason. I mean, he has a very self-catastrophic strategic for himself. Mila, we have a question from another candidate of a future candidate of Chinese policy, foreign policy in our panel. So he's asking, because I know him personally, he's one of my good friends. So he's very interested in Chinese policy, but especially in Pacific. Are there any joint Chinese and Russian projects in Balkans, and do we have an indication of the amount?
No, there is no. I forgot just to mention one thing when you asked me about Russian position on this topic, that Russia does not shows any how to say, any positive or any negative move on this Chinese presence in the Balkans. We all know that geopolitically, Russia sees Western Balkan as a part of its own, let's say, its own um, geopolitical interests, but they don't give anything. So to come back to the second question about your friend, is that they don't have any common project. They don't by far. They don't show. They didn't show any interest in this kind of projects. Because even in Russia, because I live in Russia for 3 years and I did my master, then I'm just started my PhD, and what I saw from the Russian audience, from what I've heard from Russian experts, that the opinion um, to Chinese presence in Russia, for example, it's very divided. There are many positive views, and there are also very, very negative views, because if you know Siberia, there is a border with, of course, there is a border between Russia and China, and there are many people who complain about Chinese who are buying territory, who are buying some factories in Siberia and so on. They want to take a part of Siberia, but I don't think it's like that. But still, it's just as significant how Russians judge this Chinese investments. But maybe, in my opinion, I don't think that Russia doesn't matter about this topic in the Western Balkans, but they have Central Asia that passed the Soviet Union, as you said, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and this Chinese investments in this region it's very important region, and because of course because of the influence of America, and America also wants this region as its own geopolitical piece. China wants it, I mean, economically, and of course, Russia will not give up on this region. Even just economically, they don't have any strength to compare with the Chinese, because Chinese have a budget. Chinese have a lot of very modern ways to help these small economies to repair, to get a good progress. But Russians, they just make maybe I hope they not hear me now, but they make official statements, but I don't see that they do anything to protect their own geopolitical lens.
Sorry, I think it's a very common between Orthodox. I would say the point is the same here in Cyprus. For example, we just get mad with Russians. From the other side, we cannot live without Russians. So Russia is something like you can fall in love with Russia, but you cannot marry Russia. So this is, I think, this is the way the Russians they are acting. I mean, here in Cyprus, it's so obvious that after the bail-in in 2013, they left. I mean, a lot of changes they happened, so they left Cyprus. But we have still Russian investment. So you see a lot of Cyprians when you are asking where you want to go and you want to collaborate. Yes, I prefer to work with a Russian. They say, it's the matter how Russia is working, I guess. So, Mila, from my side, I have Vucic and Netanyahu as my favorite presidents for their self-catastrophic strategic plans. They managed to destroy themselves quite well. Alexis' favorite president is Ahmadinejad in Iran, so he's a very good analyst of Ahmadinejad. Alexis, he's done a lot of good articles about Iran and Ahmadinejad. So, Alexis, the next question is coming to you. How do we see that? How Russia is reacting to Chinese investments in Central Asia and Iran?
Yeah.
I mean, Mila explained to us that they will not give up this plan because it's their living space. Actually, the 9 republics that we see around that they came out in Central Asia after the fail of Soviet Union, they're very important, and it's the living space. I would take it from the geopolitical theories.
Yeah, that's true. As you know, as everybody knows, Central Asia is considered as the near abroad in the Russian strategic calculations. So yeah, of course, they don't want the Chinese to over encroach in that territory. But the Chinese have already made some investments in Tajikistan and in these states in Central Asia, which are connected with the BRI initiative.
Actually, Alex, the investments that they've done in Tajikistan, I think it's more than 50% of the foreign investment of Tajikistan at the moment.
The monopoly.
Yes, and we have seen since 1992 that the Tajikistanis, they just cut off their Russian surnames and they make it Persianized to look like Iranians. We see that now this is also happening in some cases, even in Uzbekistan. That Uzbekistan is having a very centralized and westernized banking system.
It's different from Tajikistan.
And I think the most important that we have to mention also here for you, Mila, is that Uzbekistan was opposing for decades the entrance of Iran to Shanghai collaboration or corporation. And this month, this became true. I mean, Iran is becoming official part, and it's a party in Shanghai collaboration. So we see that Iran and China, they just working together about Shanghai collaboration. This Shanghai cooperation It's working in Central Asia, but it's going also to Pacific.
Yeah. So the question is?
The question is, Alexis, how Russia is seeing this collaboration
Yeah.
between Iran and China?
Yeah. So far, it's more like a supplementary task. You know, the Russians know that they cannot offer these investments in Iran. They know this. The Iranians know that. The Russians know
Alexei,
that.
they
So
can or they don't want to.
they can't. They can't because the economic power of China is you cannot compare it with Russia. It's you cannot compare it. Even it's the difference is huge. So the Russians know that they cannot compete economically with the Chinese in Iran, but we see now that China, as I told you before, with the case in Afghanistan, which is very important for, in my opinion, because the Chinese are, with what I see, with what I can show from their comments, from their official comments, and we see that even Iran and China announced that they will cooperate together on the Afghanistan issue. So it's very important because I think the Chinese want to divert the central corridor, as I told you before, to Afghanistan. So they won't be. So it won't be in three Central Asian countries because they know that in these Central Asian countries, the Russian influence, the political influence, not the economic one, the political influence is of Russia is bigger. So sorry for that. So I think that the Chinese, knowing that although they have already invested heavily in Central Asia, they cannot compete politically. So they want to use Afghanistan as another way for the Belt and Road Initiative.
Alexis, a key question. What is the issue between Iran and Azerbaijan at the moment? Has to do something with Chinese investments?
It has to do more, I would, in that case, no. It has to do more with the North-South corridor, which is an initiative from India, Iran, and Russia. So this corridor, the North-South corridor, begins from Mumbai, India. It then goes to the Jabahar port of Iran, and then goes to either to Armenia or Azerbaijan. That's the big question, and then eventually goes to Russia and then to Western Europe.
So actually, Alexis, there is a railway that is this railway
Yeah,
was built in something like 19th century, that is connecting Baghdad, Iraq
yeah,
to Germany, and it's been
yeah,
expanded during Reza Shah to Tehran.
right,
So there is this railway directly from Tehran to Germany. So Chakbahar, the port that is in the Indian Ocean, is a
yeah,
perfect port that is going to unite this corridor, and especially
mhm,
Chakbahar to Caspian Sea through a
yeah,
new railway that is going to be built by Chinese. So
yeah,
in this kind of case, of course, there is a connection to these Chinese investments. But from the other side, what is the issue? I mean, in
yeah.
this case, is Iran and Azerbaijan do they try to solve any old and past national issues? Is there any kind of intra-Persian things like the bad son of Azerbaijan is knocking the door of Mother Persia? How is the situation is influencing at the moment this agreement with China?
Yeah, it's we see this tension now on the northern Iranian borders with Azerbaijan. We saw this military drills. First, we saw a military drill, the Three Brothers military drill between Pakistan, Turkey, and Azerbaijan, which prompted a reaction from Iran. And then we saw a military drill on the northern Iranian borders in response. And now we see another military drill from the Azerbaijanis and Turkey. So it's spiraling into a crisis, but it's it's developing for some time now. I would say it's developing from since last year, from the war in Nagorno-Karabakh, which was not at all in the Iranian interest. The outcome was not at all in the Iranian interest, and we now see that the Iranians have three main concerns. The first concern is they are very concerned about the presence of Israel in Azerbaijan. We know that the Israelis helped a lot the Azerbaijanis during the war against Armenia last year, but there's also maybe an intelligence presence in Azerbaijan of the Israelis. So the Iranians are warning Azerbaijan that they should not allow Israel to have presence in their country, because it's for Iran a national security issue. The second issue is it concerns with the Nagorno-Karabakh war of last year. The ceasefire agreement had a provision, a vague provision, about a corridor in the Armenian territory that would connect Nakhichevan with Azerbaijan proper. So the Iranians from start expressed that they are concerned that this vague provision would change the borders of Armenia. Because if that happens, if this corridor materializes, as the Azerbaijanis want, because Iran would be excluded from Armenia, because it concerns this corridor, this land route that connects Iran to Armenia. So the Iranians are concerned that if the Azerbaijanis enforce this vague provision, it would be excluded from Armenia. So the third concern is about the transport corridor of the north-south corridor. So far, the Iranians were more inclined to use Azerbaijan for this north-south corridor to connect with Russia.
Alexis, I think that the very lucky question for you before we go to Mira is, what did Ahmadinejad say in this case?
Yeah, okay. Not only Ahmadinejad. Yeah, Ahmadinejad, I would say, in contrast with other issues, has been a little bit quiet about this issue, but we know his opinion on that. Yeah, it's very interesting, that issue, because now the Azerbaijanis blocked a road which connects Iran to Armenia. So there's a highway which connects Iran to Armenia, but passes from some lands, some parts of Azerbaijan, which was liberated last year. So we see that the Azerbaijanis blocked the road, and they didn't let, and they even arrested some Iranian truck drivers. And so Iran is having second thoughts about that, and now tries to help Armenia to build a second highway so they can totally exclude Azerbaijan from the north-south corridor.
You know, I have a...
okay, it's a little bit complicated, I know, but yeah, that's the thing.
You know, I have a Turkish collaborator when it comes to some analysis from Turkey. So I pick up the phone and I asked him, what's the situation with Azerbaijan? And he was so disappointed. And he said to me, you know, Paulina, Azerbaijanis, they're just Iranians. They behave like Iranians. I mean, why do they arrest the truckers? It's only Iranians that they do this. You know, so it was also for Turkey probably a kind of very aggressive movement, the case of how the Azerbaijanis...
I think it was a miscalculation of Azerbaijan, because I think their target was not Iran. Their target was not Iran. Their target was Armenia. So they thought that if they arrest the Iranians, they would send a message to Armenia, because Armenia says now that we will never enforce this land corridor in our land to connect Nakhichevan and Azerbaijan proper. So I think it's mostly a message. And the second message the Azerbaijanis wanted to send to the Iranians is that the Iranians are the trackers. We know that they are supplying even now the Artsakh Republic in Nagorno-Karabakh. So the Azerbaijanis wanted also to send a message to Iran to stop this supply of this trade between Iran and Artsakh.
I think that from the part of Iran, it's quite obvious that whatever happens, they just will continue their life. They will continue to do the same, to do their same job, and I think that is they just wait the part that more or less Baku is gonna, let's say, obey to what Iran says. I think this is the usual culture between Azerbaijan and Iran. Iran is the motherland, and Azerbaijan is made to well behave to Iran, to the matter that Turkey and Russia leave it. Mila, last question for tonight, and it's been a lovely pleasure to have you. And we received a lot of comments, and actually received also some emails about the explanations we gave about Western Balkans and China. It's a topic very new for us. In the Balkans, but from the other side, it's something that a lot of Greeks they think and very you said it very correct that things are changing. We had in mind that most important for us it's Russia in the Balkans because of the religion, because of the common, let's say, traditions to a point. But we see that China is getting quite really involved in there. So last question is, what do we expect to see from the part of China into Montenegro in the case that Montenegro is becoming part of the European Union? And is it this kind of agreement between Montenegro and China delays the submission of Montenegro to European Union?
Much for your question, and I was very you. And when I think about some recommendations or some conclusions, it's really hard to make it. But I doubt that traditional great powers like Russia from one side and the European Union from the other side, that's which they just how long had their well coordinated schemes of influence. Of course, the United States as well. I don't think they will allow the Balkan countries to independently decide on on a cooperation with China. Um, Historical experience suggests that great powers will not stand aside and will wait for something to happen in the Balkans on their own. Moves are currently being carefully pondered and decided upon, and concrete actions for and against the Belt and Road Initiative have yet to be put into play. And the revitalization of China in the Western Balkans and in Southeastern Europe as well is due to geoeconomic and political logic. Beijing's main goal is, of course, to use this, as I already said, to use this region as a gateway and a commercial platform for Western Europe, where China's real interests lie in its search for markets, technologies, and knowledge. But also, I think that China could gain many advantages if it continues to develop sub-regional cooperation in the Balkans through this Belt and Road Initiative and through 16+1 mechanism. The first one is, of course, solid political foundation, and secondly, if the construction of the planned infrastructure in the Balkans continues, it will provide faster and cheaper transportation of goods and products by sea. That's why Piraeus port is very important, and air. How to say? It's really hard to say what will happen in the future with this Chinese influence, but for sure it will be interesting to watch on it, and I'm sure that Chinese will use its own policy in the best way for themselves, of course. And last week, I met with one professor who is a significant expert on China in Russia, and I asked him a few questions about Chinese presence in the whole world. And then I asked him, as you mentioned, like connection with traditional powers with Russia because of culture, because of tradition, because of religion, because we are very similar cultures. He told me that he's sure that if China becomes greatest power in not just economic greatest power, but political greatest power, military greatest power. They will also they will how to say they will also try to share their civilization. What they will not just leave it on this economic presence. They will share the ideology everywhere. It's really hard to imagine that, but we will see.
Thank you very much for that. Alexis, last question. How does Greece understand the the Chinese involvement in the region, and especially the agreement between Iran and China from the time that Iran now is doing what we expect was doing, to use Beirut port. So Beirut port, if it's going to receive the Chinese and Iranian investment, probably is going to be the biggest port, is going to be a greater competitor to Haifa, to Piraeus, even here in Limassol, even in Egyptians that are wondering what is going to happen. So, what do we expect? How do we expect Greece to be involved in this scheme?
Yeah. So far, I cannot discern any Greek policy towards that so far. Although it concerns a lot Greek interest, because if the Belt and Road Initiative goes through Syria or Lebanon, the number one who will be in his interest would be Greece, because Greece has so massive shipping power. It has the biggest shipping fleet
It's
in
the
the world.
biggest. Yes, it's the
So
biggest.
it would be very good for their interest if that went there. But so far, from the policymakers, I have heard nothing at all about the Belt and Road Initiative, and that has to do more because it's something that angers probably the United States. The United States are trying to block this initiative with their allies. So far, not very successfully. And that's why we haven't heard officially something from the Greek side. Maybe it's a little bit cautious. I cannot imagine that they don't know how beneficial it would be for for Greek interests. But at the same time, I think they are cautious not to be heard over confident about that.
Yes, because in any case, after the signature of the Abraham Accords, we belong also to this alliance that starts from Bahrain, Persian Gulf, and ends up in Gibraltar after the normalization of the relations between Morocco and
Yeah.
Israel. So at the moment, we are more than the little. So we are the little
Although we have
exactly.
good relations, historically speaking, with Iran, we should mention that, as well as Cyprus. We could say that we have a good relationship. Both of us have a good relationship with Iran. But now
I think
it's true that Iran is not a priority right now in Greek foreign policy. Yeah, that's true.
I think we didn't really understand the importance of Iran at this moment. Generally, though we were very close as civilizations and we share a very glorious past, I think at the moment we cannot realize what is the importance of Iran. But from the other side, I believe that as we choose this kind of alliance after the Abraham Accords, of course we don't see Iran as an enemy, but from the other side, the culture of trust between Cyprus or Greece and Iran is very limited to the very official and diplomatic relations.
Yeah, but there is no suspicion or animosity, I would say.
No, of course not. Yes,
it had to do as well with the sanctions, because before the sanctions regime, the Greek imports of petrol were mostly from Iran, and even
actually,
Iran
I
had
think
very favorable.
we
Iran had
own
very
them. We own them some millions
Yeah,
still.
because Iran had very favorable terms for the payment of the shipments. Very favorable if you compare them with Saudi Arabia, for example. Yeah, but because of the sanctions, this economic transaction,
It's became difficult. Yes.
it's became difficult or null, I would say. Yeah.
So thank you very much both. Thank you, Mila, for joining us from Moscow. It's been really a pleasure because we never before had a kind of analysis of Chinese policy and especially what's going on in Balkans. So we will be glad to host you soon again to our show and have more extensively chat about China.
I just have to add one more thing, that I was waiting all the time for Alex to mention some kind of great Greek history, and I was like waiting for why he didn't mention like Alexander of Macedonia and Persian Tsar Dario. It would be so interesting, but okay, next time I
We
hope.
would need 3 hours for the show, and if I did that, we would need 3 hours more.
Okay, but just not to miss one question. If I see it well, I sorry if I don't pronunciate it well, Miss Salis. He also just asked about the Russian-Chinese relations, and yes, what he wrote about the investments and about that China refused to cooperate with Russia in Central Asia. I know about that, but I don't know that much about Russian-Chinese Sino-Russian relations. So I would not like to comment on that. Probably he knows more than me. That's so. It's better to that maybe next time he tells us what thinks about that.
Thank you both for tonight. It's been a pleasure. We're expecting more or less with the next year shows to have you both and have more experience on China and what's going on in Balkans. It's been a pleasure to have you both in this show. We discuss a lot of things. We learn a lot. Actually, we receive a lot of messages and emails. So we're very glad about it that people they do consider your thoughts as well. So for next Sunday at the same time, we're going to have two professors from Greece, Dr. Roussos and Dr. Plios, that we're going to discuss what's going on in MENA from the geopolitical part, and from the other part, we're going to discuss the influence of media into that and how the media, they just create national strategies about it. The show is going to be in Greek. And on the 24th, we're going to have, is the last show for the month, we're going to have two people from Israel. We're going to discuss about Iran. It's going to be a discussion about Iran and the Israeli foreign policy. So it's going to be a person from the Israeli Prime Minister office and from one from the Israeli universities. And Alexis, we are going to be together on the 7th of November. That we are going to hold a discussion about Soleimani, and we are going to host the translator of the book about Soleimani and also his diplomat. Correct?
True.
So we have long things until we get to the end of the year, and our friends they can get new knowledge as they just consider it and they send us a lot of messages. So thank you both. we're going to see each other very soon. And our audience, it's been great tonight as well with the questions. And we will see us next Sunday, same time, 9 Greece time. And we're going to help them show in Greek language. Thank you very much, both. Thank you very much, all of
Thank
you, for
you.
watching us. Bye bye.